The stories you're about to hear are based on true events shared by real people. Back in 2011, I was part of a group of friends who had a tradition of going camping at the same remote spot every May-long weekend. The area was stunning, right on the edge of a large lake situated on public land. The lake had a dam, so during the May-long weekend, the water level was usually very low, sometimes completely dry, making it possible to walk across it. People were allowed to camp there as long as they weren't causing problems or leaving a mess. It was usually a peaceful and fun getaway. The campsites were spaced out enough to give you privacy, but close enough that you could still meet others. That year, our campsite was on a small hill, with one group camping below us and another above. The first night went by without any issues. On the second day, a new group moved into the site below us. We didn't think much of it and kept drinking and hanging out throughout the day and into the night. Around midnight, things took a turn. The group below got loud and aggressive, their music was blaring, and they were yelling nonstop. One of our friends, I'll call him Jason, went down to ask them to turn it down. He came back shortly after with a swollen face, saying he'd been punched and that he was almost certain they were high on something. That's when the atmosphere changed. Everyone was on edge. I was tired and decided to go to bed. Some friends stayed up, including Jason, and a couple, I'll call them Emily and Tom, who had gone to visit another friendly campsite we had met earlier that day. Even while lying in my tent, I could hear the group below still partying loudly. I don't remember exactly what time it was when I was jolted awake, but I remember sitting straight up the second I heard screaming and yelling from outside. I rushed out of the tent and found our campsite in complete chaos. One friend was clutching their chest and others were running around shouting for someone to call 911. Here's what I was told happened. Not long after I went to sleep, the group from the site below decided they weren't finished with Jason. On their way up the hill, they ran into Emily and Tom walking back. Jason and Tom are about the same height and have similar hair, so they mistook Tom for Jason. Without hesitation, they smashed full glass bottles over both their heads. A little while later, 2 or 3 large men showed up at our site, one holding a paring knife, the other a butcher's knife. Jason got up to confront them, but before he could say much, the one with the paring knife stabbed him in the chest. At the same time, someone from the site above, I'll call him Mark, had seen what was going on and ran down to help. As he came down the hill, the guy with the butcher's knife rushed at him and stabbed him in the stomach. That's when everything exploded into panic. People called 911, but the nearest ambulance was more than 30 minutes away. This is when I stepped out of my tent and saw what was happening. Mark was bleeding heavily and fading fast. His friends threw him into their car and raced off to meet the ambulance halfway. Jason was also bleeding, but his wound wasn't as deep. We managed to keep him calm and stable until help arrived. The attackers disappeared into the darkness and fled back to their site, then took off in a dark SUV. My boyfriend at the time and I jumped into his car and drove to the entrance to flag down the police. When they arrived, we were told to stay inside the vehicle because a K-9 unit had been released to track the suspects. By the end of the night, the police had them in custody. They had tried to escape by driving across the dry lake bed, but got stuck in the mud. As suspected, they were under the influence of multiple drugs. Thankfully, both Jason and Mark survived. Mark had lost a lot of blood and took weeks to recover. Tom and Emily were left with serious head injuries, large welts, and possibly a concussion, though I don't recall exactly. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. Some of us later had to testify in court. Last summer, my boyfriend and I went camping in a nature preserve somewhere in the Northeast. I can't remember the name. It was pretty primitive camping, no cell service, and we only saw 2 other people the entire time. The place was huge, so it felt pretty empty. My boyfriend immediately said those 2 people seemed off to him. I don't know if they had anything to do with what happened that night, but I'll describe them anyway. The first person was a woman who had her truck parked off the trail with the hood up. I don't really notice these kinds of things, but my boyfriend said it looked like she was waiting for someone to pull over and offer help. Normally, he's the type to at least offer to call someone, but he said she creeped him out enough that he didn't even want to draw her attention more than necessary. The next person we saw drove by several times while we were setting up. He kept passing slowly and looking at us. I didn't even notice until my boyfriend pointed out that he'd already driven by twice. Whether those two people had anything sinister going on or not, the real story is what happened around 3 a.m. We were woken up by an incredibly loud, sudden noise. I couldn't describe it or compare it to anything, but my boyfriend said it sounded like a chain gun revving up or someone using a large tool to scrape gravel. He jumped up and looked out the little window of the tent. The sound happened again and again and again, getting noticeably closer each time. I was about to piss myself, but my boyfriend told me it was probably miles away. I didn't question it because loud noises can travel miles, right? Well, later he told me he only said that so I wouldn't panic. In reality, it sounded like it was coming from just down the little dirt road. At one point, he suspected it was right in front of our campsite. The only reason he didn't tell me to get out and run to the car was because he was afraid someone was trying to scare us out of the tent for some sinister reason. He whispered to me to go back to sleep. I should have realized something was wrong. He wouldn't have whispered unless he was seriously concerned, right? But I couldn't sleep. Every little sound outside made me think someone was sneaking up to the tent. Eventually, about 20 minutes after the noise stopped, he told me to get up and help him pack. He held our only weapon, a machete, in front of him. It was a full moon or close to it, so we didn't need a light. While we packed quickly, I noticed an empty beer can near our dead campfire. It definitely wasn't there when we went to sleep around 10 p.m., and neither of us had brought any beer. Thankfully, we got out of there safely. For the rest of the trip, we only camped in areas with other campers or stayed in hotels. So, me and my best friend try to go camping once a year. We've been doing this since we were 13 years old. Never really been truly scared or had anything weird happen until last year in the Grayson Highlands. We showed up during peak season the first night and space was very limited. We were losing light, so we set up camp on a spot on the side of the mountain that was an absolute wind tunnel. Morning came, so we went into town, drank beers, and dicked around until late afternoon. By the time we got back up to the mountains to switch our camping spot, we were losing light again, but managed to find a more remote spot. We get set up with our tents, get the fire going, and start drinking again. Time goes by, it's probably 1 a.m. when we see a flashlight aimed at us. And then it starts walking our way. We don't really think much of it and assume it's likely a park ranger coming to fuss at us about something. Because who else walks up on you in a remote part of the mountains at 1 a.m.? I don't know about you, but ever since I started camping, I've learned it's kind of an unspoken rule that you don't walk up on someone camping that late at night unless it's an emergency. Anyways, the person gets close enough and we realize it's just some guy, probably early 50s, in a shirt and basketball shorts, and his girl 40s who is avoiding eye contact with us. The man immediately forces a conversation about nothing, doesn't acknowledge the time or his girl. His eyes were darting all over the place while we're talking to him about dumb shit like what model or style of lantern we had and how cool it was. He's saying weird stuff like how he used to be former law enforcement completely out of context in the random conversation he engaged us in, when all of a sudden he pretends to land his flashlight on our tents and says, "Oh, that's where you guys are sleeping, huh? Cool setup." The way his eyes and flashlight are moving gives us both the feeling that he's trying to see how many of us were there and what we had on us or near us, because his eyes and flashlight kept scanning the ground around us. We were getting sized up. For what? I don't know. Once this guy sees everything around us, he kind of pauses for a minute, ends the conversation, and walks off into the woods. Once his flashlight disappears, me and my friend look at each other, and without me saying anything, he looks at me and says, "We're packing our shit and getting out of here." So we did. This was the most unsettling thing I have ever had happen while camping. I think this guy was going to wait until we were asleep and come back. I just don't know for what, but I do know we were 100% getting sized up that night. Might not seem like much, but if you have ever had a moment with another human being who was sizing you up, you'll know what I'm talking about.